has a new cryptid been born on the war-torn battlefields of Ukraine? And then we take a look at the story of a kindly old grandma who, as she's gotten older and older, has become a little less kind. When this grandma believes that one of her relatives is stealing from her, she decides to take matters into her own hands. And this grandma is a master of the dark arts. Today on Dead Rabbit Radio. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Dead Rabbit Radio. I'm your host, Jason Carpenter. I'm having a great day. Hope you guys are having a great day too. Hope you guys are having tons of fun doing whatever you're doing. We got a lot of stuff to cover today, so first off, walking solemnly into Dead Rabbit Command, everyone give it up for one of our newest Patreon supporters, Rhett S. Woohoo, yeah, we're all clapping, we're all singing as he's walking in all solemnly. Rhett, you're going to be our captain, our pilot this episode. If you guys can't support the Patreon, I totally understand. I really do. Just help spread the word about the show. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell everyone you know. Dead Rabbit Radio is your favorite paranormal show. Rhett was walking out all solemnly because he wanted to be featured on a depressing episode. So, while I wouldn't classify this episode as depressing per se, he's been in my files for quite a while. I gotta do an episode with him in it. I think the stories are a little grim. But I try not to do super dark stuff on Fridays because you guys are going to have a nice weekend. Although I do have to say this episode involves a current war and a vengeful grandma, so it's not the lightest of material. And also, Fan Art Friday, let's take a look at this art. Jason, I was wondering what in the world this was a picture of. I was wondering what. This was sent to me a while ago by Minimum Zucchini on Reddit. And if you can't look at your artwork, it's a picture it's from a Charlie Brown cartoon. You know how they had Lucy or Linus or Pinky or whatever was a psychiatrist talking to another kid. Okay, that's the first layer to this. And then, on top of that, the psychiatrist has the Dead Rabbit logo head, which is me. And then the customer, the other kid, I was like, who's that? It's just this Photoshop of some dude in sunglasses. And Minimum Zucchini sent this over to me quite a while ago, and I was like, what? What is this? Who's that guy? I don't know. So apparently it's a reference to an episode, hundreds of episodes back, right? Maybe in like episode 100, 200 in that range, where I'll put it in the show notes if I can find it. I used to be a telephone psychic. I was a telephone psychic for a month, and I told this story about a guy who I helped out with his music career. And at the end of the story, I barely remember. I remember being a telephone psychic. I don't remember the joke I told at the end. But I guess I said at the end of the episode, that guy turned out to be Chad Kroger. And then I go, no, it was just some musician guy. I never knew what happened to him. And so what I understand, Minimum Zucchini's like, oh, you don't remember the joke you made 4 years ago? He goes, I think that's Chad Kroger. Well, he knows exactly who it is. I think that's Chad Kroger. That's him. So it's supposed to be me being the psychiatrist for him. Pretty funny. Would have been more hilarious had I received it 4 years ago. We all would have had a good chuckle. Right now, everyone's just kind of scratching their heads, but I love it. I love all the artwork you send me. All you guys, Minimum Zucchini, thanks for sending that over. I just thought it was hilarious. I was like, I gotta use this eventually. Rhett S., let's go ahead and get this party started. I'm going to toss you the keys to the Dead Rabbit dirigible. We're going to leave behind Dead Rabbit Command to fly us all the way out to Ukraine. Probably should have brought a more heavily armored vehicle flying over an active war zone. I'm recording this episode actually on the 23rd of August, so it's about a day before it'll get released. And I woke up to the news. This is all probably old news to you, especially if you're listening to this 4 years from now. You're like, oh yeah, it was old news. This was the day that my mom can pronounce it perfectly. I have no idea why I can't. Well, there's a lot of words I can't pronounce. Prigozhin, the leader of the Wagner group, that mercenary force that was marching on the Kremlin not too long ago. And we all thought there was going to be a civil war in Russia, and we're like, well, this is weird. I didn't have this on my bingo card, and there's a lot of stuff happening I haven't had on my bingo card this year. I go, what? Troops, he got tired of his troops getting shelled from behind friendly lines, or, I mean, like, his troops are getting killed by other Russians. So weird, and then eventually he's like, okay, and he marched on the Kremlin, and he got, like, maybe 100 miles outside, and he's like, nah, this will just cause a lot of Russian-on-Russian violence. I don't want to be part of it. So he went into a self-imposed exile with, I think, 10,000 of his men, maybe less, maybe it's like 5,000, to Belarus, and the rest of his mercenary forces were absorbed into the regular Russian military. And everyone on planet Earth, people who weren't super, had read the newspaper a lot, I read the newspaper all the time, can't pronounce it, but I can read it. Everyone on planet Earth, except for one person, goes, oh, that dude's dead. Like, there's no way. I'm pretty sure Putin shot a guy with a... there's that old story. There's like that Russian refugee, that Russian journalist or something like that in Britain who got bone cancer that killed him in like a matter of a couple months. And the idea was that MI6, British Secret Service, said, we think that Putin sent over a dude with a umbrella gun. This was in the newspaper. People were like, what? This exists? I thought this was just in James Bond movies. This poor guy died of immediate bone cancer. And the secret organizations like MI6 and stuff like that, CIA, go, we think that Putin sent an agent over with an umbrella that shot out little radiation pellets and shot him and then gave him bone cancer. That's what we think happened. And immediately you start thinking, what is all this time we're debating about guns and stuff? I mean, we're like, that gun can fire 30 rounds in less than a minute. I think we should probably be regulating umbrellas as well. If there's an umbrella out there that can give you bone cancer with a single shot. Anyways, everyone was like, oh, this Prigozhin guy, he's dead. He's going to die. He's going to die. But apparently, I guess he didn't think that. Well, his plane crashed earlier today. His plane crashed, and everyone on board was dead, is what the reports are. He was listed in the flight log, and everyone's dead. Now, some people said it could have been a body double. Some people said that a lot of people are using that as a fake name to throw off Putin, whether or not, like, to crash a plane, or that would be a crummy job, right? Your mom's like, hey, did you ever get a good paying job after college? You're like, yeah, dude, you know that guy who pissed off Vladimir Putin? I'm getting paid to travel the world with his name. You're like, oh, all right, yeah, make sure I'm not on any boats or planes with you. There's the theory that it wasn't really him on the plane, bodied. And I think that conspiracy theory, and it may be true, right? He might pop up in a video soon, but that conspiracy theory will be with us for a long time. That he didn't really die. Crazy story, and I think it will live on it may not be a big Western conspiracy theory, but it'll be in Eastern Europe a big conspiracy theory for a long time, that he's behind the scenes pulling strings and stuff like that. Who knows? Anyways, the reason why we're talking about Prigozhin, because we're in Ukraine. I came across this story just the other day. I teased it yesterday. Absolutely bizarre. The birth of a new cryptid, and maybe even the birth of a new category of cryptid. We're in Ukraine now, specifically. We're near Bakhmut. Bakhmut? Strap in, guys. Strap in. There's going to be a lot of mispronunciations. We're currently on the front lines in the war between Russia and Ukraine, near Bakhmut. The sun is long set, and we're about to join a group of Chechen fighters taking up positions in the darkness. But out in the field, there's a dude laying there. One of their own. This Chechen soldier has been shot, and he's like, this is dark. This is pretty dark. This is pretty depressing. He's laying there in the darkness. He's screaming for help, and they're like, we need to go out and help him. And the commander's like, not yet. Like, if we go out there, we know what's going to happen. And this other dude, he's like, but sir, we can hear him screaming. He's only 50 yards out, I'm sure. And the commander's like, no, niet. Don't go out there. It's too late. Everyone hears the unmistakable sound of a loud, gas-powered engine rumbling through the night sky. It's headed right towards them. They're not foolish enough to turn on any sort of floodlights to try to see what's about to happen. These soldiers are squinting through the darkness, trying to catch a glimpse, knowing what is out there. But they still want to see if the stories are true. The wounded soldier on the battlefield is screaming for his life. And then slowly, the screams grow fainter and fainter and fainter as he is carried off into the night by the Baba Yaga. What a super weird story coming out of the battlefields of Ukraine. I found the story on the dailybeast.com by Allison Quinn. She did a write-up of it, and she got it from an author named Lena Korsak, who writes for a website called MKRU, which is a Russian-based website. And this is the story. So there is the legend of a Slavic cryptid known as the Baba Yaga. Very, very classic story. It's a witch who flies around in a kettle. Flies around in a kettle. It's kind of funny, right? If you're going to get abducted by anything, at least you get a good chuckle as she's tearing your guts. There's this Baba Yaga, basically like a boogeyman or a witch-type character. She flies around in a kettle. Sometimes she has a little henchman flying around with her. And when she finds you, she grabs you and carries you off and then eats you. She specifically loves to eat children. That's really where the boogeyman part of it comes from. She apparently has these bird-like claws, bird-like legs. And oddly enough, she also guards the fountain of youth, like the fountain of life, which, I mean, I guess that's the gig economy, right? You got to do two things nowadays. The Baba Yaga is old legend. Well, this new thing, the Chechen soldiers call it Baba Yaga, but it's not a mythical creature of old. It's a drone that apparently is operating in this region. There's a group of Chechen fighters known as the Akhmata Battalion, and Lena Korsak was interviewing one of these guys, and he goes by the name Rout. He goes, yeah, we're having a lot of trouble with this thing we call the Baba Yaga. It's a drone that's operated by Ukraine, and it has these claws. Flies through the sky, and it has these two giant claws that are hanging off the bottom of it. And it's been picking up our wounded, flying off with them. And now it's gotten even more brazen. There have been reports, according to Rout, that this thing is flying over and grabbing uninjured troops, right? You're just sitting in a trench. You're just sitting in a trench smoking a cigarette. And all of a sudden you're like, wait, what? I'm pretty sure I wasn't 300 feet in the air. You're getting dragged away. The Baba Yaga drones have apparently been grabbing uninjured troops. And you go, Jason, well, is that the cryptid you're talking about? Is it this drone that's flying around? I mean, drones exist, Jason. They're real. Is this a real cryptid? Well, let's take a look at some of these, the way they describe these things, because if you do study cryptids, there's a lot of comparisons between the two. I'm wondering if this isn't something that Ukraine has actually manufactured or got from another country. I wonder if there's something else going on. The Baba Yaga only hunts at night. And Rout says, well, that's because it's so loud. So it has to go under the cover of night. Okay. The Baba Yaga has two smaller drones that fly next to it. Little henchmen, just like the old stories. And Rout goes, well, that's because the camera on the Baba Yaga isn't that good. So it has these two little henchmen next to it. Those are the cameras that determine what to pick up. This thing is almost invulnerable to small arms fire. There's only two ways to kill it. A lot of cryptids, right? Even going back to the days of like werewolf and Dracula, that kind of borders between cryptids and folklore monsters. But We see this in a lot of cryptid stories. There's very, very specific ways to kill them. He goes, they're invulnerable to small arms fire. Because the Ukrainians have been putting these armor plating at the bottom of these drones. They take bulletproof vests and put them on the drones. The only way to destroy these things is with a flamethrower or a grenade launcher. Like, Jason, wow, I think that'll pretty much destroy anything. I don't think Dracula stands much of a chance against a grenade launcher. It fits the qualifications of what we would say was a cryptid, right? It has a specific hunting ground. It has a specific hunting time. It's doing things that really shouldn't be possible. I get that military hardware is above consumer level hardware. And I know it's been a while. The only drone I could find that had claws on it was, they did an article on them back in 2016. They can only carry 22 pounds. So you figure, yeah, it's been 8 years from now. Maybe it could carry. I'm sure that they've made drones that could carry 200-pound people. Why is the camera so bad on it, though? If you're building this thing, if you're using it to pick up these wounded soldiers, don't you think you could put a better camera on it? Why does it have the henchmen? Just like the Baba Yaga flew with the henchmen. And the big question that people ask, because this story's kind of gone viral in the past couple days, is why would they want to do it in the first place? You have this drone. Apparently, it can also put down landmines, or it's dropping cluster bombs and things like that. You know, Rot was saying all this stuff. But its main purpose at night, the reason why it's doing these night missions, is to pick up people and fly away. And the question is why? What would the Ukrainians gain from stealing injured and healthy soldiers one at a time? I mean, obviously, the idea of putting terror into the hearts of your enemies is a age-old military tactic, but I don't think this is what they think it is. I'll say that these events may actually be happening. People may be being picked off the battlefield by a flying, mechanized entity. But I don't think they're taking them back behind Ukrainian lines and they're like, aha, we got you. Tell us what you know. And they're like, dude, because you think about it, you're pretty much picking random people out of a trench. Unless they're specifically wearing their rank. And you're like, Jason, all military wears their rank. Remember, these guys are only flying at night. They have to have these two little guys to help them see. You're grabbing random people, for the most part. I think that the event may be happening. I don't think it's the Ukrainians doing it. I think there may be something out there snatching people off the battlefield to never be seen again. And this might, I mean, it very well may be the Ukrainians doing it, right? It could be a weapon of war to terrorize people. It seems like it's more trouble than it's worth, honestly. If I could fly a drone over a trench and pull a guy out of it, or do what it was designed to do, according to Route, fly it over a trench and drop a bunch of explosions, drop a bunch of bombs into the trench, what's more effective, and really what's scarier too, right? I don't think it's the Ukrainians doing it, and this may be a new cryptid, right? This may be not only that, but this may also be a sign of what cryptids in the future are going to look like. I did a story, I think we kind of did a story like this, 400 episodes ago, that what would cryptids be in the future if you lived in a world with no forests? If we started colonizing Mars, within 100 years, maybe even less, we'd have urban legends and cryptids specifically for Mars. There would be stories about an explorer who went out past that mountain range and never came back. Well, that'll actually probably just happen because it'll be so dangerous. But you know what I mean? There will be legends. Did you know that if you go out late at night to that crater just outside of the base, there's a boogeyman out there? And they're like, what? They're floating around. And he's like, yeah, it's super spooky. I had a friend who went out there once. And he played Charlie, and the pencil was spinning around and poked his suit. And all of a sudden, he decompressed and he died. It was just like Total Recall, that documentary everyone has to watch before they fly up here. And to this day, his innards are still floating around that crater. It's super gross. And if you happen to go there past 3 a.m., you'll see him trying to squeeze himself back into his broken spacesuit. But once he realizes he can't do that, he'll begin coming towards you to steal your suit. Kids are like, ah. I go to bed. Go to bed, kids. The beds are all floating around too. They're like, ah. That will happen. The urban legends, the cryptid stories will evolve with humanity. And I think we will see stories that are like this. We will start to see, as we become, I mean, think about it. It's only been about less than 150 years since the Industrial Revolution, really. Our legends are just starting to catch up. We went from being afraid of werewolves and boogeymen to aliens in a very, very short order of time. So I think that that's what this might be. I'm not saying that what they're experiencing isn't happening at all, and it may be a Ukrainian drone. Militarily, it doesn't make a lot of sense to run this gas-guzzling, armor-plated drone with a bad camera to pick people up at random, flying back to friendly Ukrainian lines to interrogate them. It does make sense for an entity to do this. It does make sense for an entity to feed off the dead and the dying, and then when it gets strong enough to begin attacking the healthy and the living. That we see that just in the world of nature, and we definitely see that in the world of cryptids, the world of legends. This event is probably happening. I'm not saying they're making it up. I just think they're mistaken as to what the origin of it is. And it could be the sign of the future of cryptids. Things will keep evolving. The stories will never go away. They'll just keep changing to be more relevant to modern times. As somebody go and Natasha the keys of the Carpenter copter, we are leaving behind Ukraine. Fly us all the way out to Grandma's house. About to meet a young man. We're going to go ahead and call him Tony. He didn't give his exact name. We're going to call him Tony. And he said that his particular grandma, we don't know where this story took place, but he goes, his particular grandma, she was getting up there in age, and it was time when she needed a little help. But honestly, probably more than just a little help. She needed someone to kind of be there with her to help out with things. Well, one summer, Tony and his family were spending a couple weeks at his grandma's place. And Tony's cousin Robbie had showed up at Grandma's house. And Robbie goes, hey, Grandma, do you mind if I park my RV next to your house? And everyone thought this would be a good idea, honestly. Like, Robbie needed it. Robbie needed a place to park his RV to live. And because Grandma, she was getting older, she was a widow, she was alone, she'd been alone for the past 4 years. What a great combination. Let's peanut butter and jelly this thing. Robbie has a place to stay, Grandma has someone to help with. Because she'd gotten to the point where she wasn't even really leaving the house. So she needed that help. And Robbie figured, and he told other people in the family, yeah, I'm going to have my RV here, and that's great for me, but Grandma needs my help really bad. Like, she really does need someone here. It's going to work out for good. It's going to work out great for both of us. But Grandma didn't see it that way. Robbie does park his RV there, and he is living with Grandma and helping her out with stuff, but Grandma becomes very suspicious of Robbie's true intentions. She believes that he is stealing from her. Stealing electricity. Right? On the grand scheme of things, that's not too bad. Stealing electricity. I mean, come on. Technically, you don't own it. Unless this guy's running like an electronic dance music hall. You know, what is it? An extra $20, $30 on your monthly bill. But anyways, she believes he's stealing electricity. Now, Tony goes, because remember, he's the narrator. He's the one who's telling us the story. He goes, I don't really think that Robbie was doing that. Like, Robbie must have had a hookup somewhere, but I don't think whatever he was doing, he wasn't doing it maliciously. I mean, obviously, he was going to be like, good night, Grandma, and go to his RV, and he's just sitting in the darkness. He goes, now I wait. Now I wait for Baba Yaga to take me away. But Tony goes, I don't think whatever he was doing, I don't think he was stealing anything. I don't think he was doing anything malicious. But Grandma didn't see it that way. Grandma definitely saw Robbie as a mooch of electricity. Which, again, far worse things to be accused of when it comes to stealing things from old people. And Tony's still there, right? They're there for quite a while during this particular time. Robbie had just shown up, and he's doing all this stuff. And it doesn't take long for Grandma to start getting suspicious. And she'll walk around the house, and she's muttering threats to Robbie under her breath. That little electrical stealing guy, who does he think he is, huh? Electro. People are like, what? How do you know who Electro is? She's like, oh, what? I watched Amazing Spider-Man 2, young man. I love Jamie Foxx. I hate Jamie Foxx so much. Jamie Foxx thinks he's so cool since Collateral. Oh, he's always just in living color to me. They're like, what, huh? Why don't you like Jamie Foxx? She's like, well, I love Jamie Foxx. Anyways. She mutters under... My grandma did that. My great-grandma McGee muttered under her breath all the time. All the time she would insult you. And every so often I'd go, what'd you say, Grandma? She's like, nothing. I'm sorry. You'd have to call her on it sometimes. She would do it all the time. You're like, Jason, you shouldn't be mean to your great-grandma. I wasn't mean to my great-grandma. But sometimes she would insult people under her breath while you were still in the room. And every so often you'd be like, Grandma. She's like, I'm sorry. Because she got caught, right? She was just talking. She's saying mean stuff. Not a lot of times, you know. Anyways, a bunch of people are unsubscribing to the podcast. They're like, Jason's mean to his grandma. I was never mean to my grandma. Anyways. They're like, Grandma, Robbie is not stealing electricity from you. Tony's family is like, that's not happening. Because she's muttering under her breath. The family's like, Grandma, Robbie is like actually doing you a lot of favors by being here. Yeah, a lot of favors. Oh, favors. You walk out of the room and they're like, dude, Grandma's like really getting it out for Robbie. And they were right, because eventually she started going up to Robbie's mom. Apparently she started talking directly to Robbie's mom. I don't know if they all lived kind of in the same area or probably, over the phone even. Started bad-mouthing Robbie to his own mother. And then finally she confronted Robbie himself and got on him about stealing the electricity. He's like, Grandma, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I'm not stealing electricity. I mean, in theory, you just can't do that. It's just shooting through cables. Now, again, maybe he did have a power cable running into the house. But remember, Robbie's family's defending him. They're like, Grandma, Robbie is not doing anything wrong. And at one point, though, when she does finally confront Robbie about stealing electricity, she looks him dead in the eyes and yells, I'll get you, you little bastard. It wasn't under her breath. She said it, and she knew that he heard it. But it's false threats from an old woman, right? What's she gonna do? I mean, it would break your heart. I guess I shouldn't be that callous. I'm like, go to bed, old woman. Baba Yaga's coming for you tonight. False threats from an old woman. I mean, it would break your heart, right? Somebody that was your grandma is like straight up calling you a bastard, saying they're gonna get you. That's not cool. It's kind of spooky. But I mean, like, what's she gonna do? But despite her age, and despite her failing memory, despite the fact that she doesn't want to leave the home, she is still knowledgeable in the practice of voodoo. Her husband, her now deceased husband, had taught her what he knew about performing voodoo rituals. Shortly after this confrontation, Robbie begins to feel ill. Begins to suffer from the occasional bout of chest pain. Now, Tony will admit, listen, let's be honest. My cousin Robbie was overweight. He was overweight. But he was also only 34 years old. He was only 34 years old. He could do to lose some pounds, but, still a young man. And Robbie does what we're supposed to do. He gets out of the doctor's office and he goes, the doctor says I'm okay, but I don't like the way things are headed. Like, if I'm experiencing chest pain at age 34, it's time to, let's lose some weight. Let's get rid of this. So he begins working out. He focuses on healthy eating. He begins walking every single day. Just staying active. Robbie is a new father. He has a kid. I don't think the kid lives in the RV. Maybe the kid was stealing all the electricity. PS5, Daddy, I want to play it. Sure, kid, go nuts. Hook up 2 of them for extra electricity. Robbie has a little boy, and he doesn't want to die young. He wants to be there for his son. He wants to be around for him. So he's like, I'm going to start eating healthy. I'm going to start walking. And who knows where, walking's the beginning. Maybe I'll get into other layers of fitness. That's usually how it works. Walking is a gateway drug. Days after the doctor visit, Robbie's still focusing on health. He's losing a little bit of weight. Weeks go by. Robbie's still on this journey. He's still afraid of what those chest pains meant. At this point, Tony and his family have gone back home, right? They were just there for a couple of weeks with Grandma, and they kind of got to see all of this stuff churning up, but everything seems to have settled down. And they weren't there just for that. It was just a scheduled vacation. Well, eventually they get back home, and Tony is over at his aunt's house, Robbie's mom's house. Tony's hanging out over there, and all of a sudden, there's a knock at the door. It's the sheriff. Excuse me, ma'am. Young Tony over there, I see. I got some bad news for y'all. Your son, Robbie. I don't think the cops started laughing. I don't know why I gave him this accent. I have no idea where the story took place. Your son, Robbie, is a good man. See him walking around town, losing a little bit of that chub. I don't think the sheriff shows up and compliments your son before he gives you the news. He's all right. He's a good boy. He's a good boy. I see him around town. But I got some bad news for y'all. Earlier today, we found Robbie. He wasn't walking. He was doing the opposite of it. He was laying down in the middle of the woods. I hate to tell you, ma'am, but your son's dead. Robbie had died out in the middle of the woods at his favorite hunting spot. An autopsy was performed because he's so young. They're going to do an autopsy if they're like, dude, he's only 34 years old. He doesn't have antler-related injuries, not a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Let's cut him open, find out what happened to this kid. The sheriff walks in, he's like, howdy, coroner. Howdy. I'm here to see on the Robbie boy. Notice he'd been doing a lot of walking. Anyways, they do an autopsy on Robbie. He died of a heart attack, age 34. Less than a month later, Grandma dies. Sad, right? You lose 2 members of your family in such short order. One, Grandma, she's older, she'd already been having trouble. You kind of expect it. It doesn't make it any less sad. But then you also lose a very young member of the family. A father, a cousin, a son, right? And Tony and his family went to Grandma's house to clean it up. Go through all of her possessions, sort it out. Take some of it to the Goodwill, take some of it home. Some of it is just thrown away. And as they're going through Grandma's possessions, they find a little voodoo doll. Tony said that it appeared, I mean, he's not an expert, right? But Tony said if I had to venture a guess, this voodoo doll looked like it was made out of some of Robbie's hair. You'd probably recognize the hair of your cousin if you spent a lot of time with him. You'd probably recognize his hair. I don't know if I could. He also, this is kind of adorable. I know, this is supposed to be a dark story. But this is adorable. This little voodoo doll, right? It's made out of Robbie's hair. It was also wearing... It's so funny. It's not cool that this guy's cousin died at all. But this little voodoo doll was wearing a miniature version of Carhartt-style overalls. So apparently Robbie, which I probably should have put that up earlier in the story, like, oh, I imagined him in dungarees and a dapper hat. Apparently he always wore these Carhartt overalls. And it's a brand of overall if you're not familiar with it. And the little voodoo doll had like a little pair of overalls. So wearing these guys. It's the way that Robbie always dressed. And on the voodoo doll was a little heart-shaped patch that was embroidered onto the outside of the overalls. And right through the middle of this little red heart-shaped patch, a sewing needle was jabbed right through it. Tony said they found this voodoo doll, and they kind of discussed it amongst themselves, Tony and his family. And they made a decision that day. They never told Robbie's mother what they had found. They never let her know their suspicions that Grandma killed Robbie. Super interesting story, super creepy, right? We don't talk a lot about magic on this show, even though it's one of the... Magic is the point where, you know, the average person in the world of the paranormal can intersect on a daily basis. It's super dangerous stuff. I don't recommend people messing around with it. This is kind of what I'm comparing it to. You may go, I don't want to hang over at Joe's house. He has all those loaded shotguns everywhere. I mean, he seems to be responsible with them. He keeps them loaded all the time. That's not good. It's not super responsible, but Joe's a hunter. And on his weekends, he just likes to drive around. He drives around and shoots randomly out of his windows. I'm pretty sure he's a gangbanger as well. He hunts deer during the week, and on the weekends, he shoots up rival gangs. I don't really want to go over to Joe's house. There's just guns everywhere. He knows a lot about guns. He knows how to operate them. He knows how to clean them. He knows how to shoot a moving target when he's driving in the opposite direction. But I don't feel comfortable being over there because there's just guns. So let's go hang out at Mary's house. Yeah, she's a practitioner of the dark arts. She knows everything. Low magic, high magic. She knows it all. And she keeps a couple crystals out on her shelf. She has some healing runes tattooed on her arm. She burns sage. Let's go over to her house. Let's hang out with her. Which one's more dangerous? Clearly, it's the man who's opening fire on rival gangsters. For fun. He's not even in a gang. He's just shooting at random gangsters. Obviously him. Well, sure, okay, sure, that was a bad comparison. But what I'm saying is that when you're around people who know how to use magic, you're walking on eggshells. And you're hanging out with someone who does know how to do these things. And you piss them off. You show up and you're like, hey, do you mind if I charge my phone? And they're like, you're stealing my electricity, aren't you? If you believe that you can be cursed, and you interact with people who have the ability to cast curses, I don't want to say you're asking for it. I don't sound like I'm victim blaming. I'll just say you got to be careful. Now, in Robbie's case, it's not like, Robbie's case, he's living in his RV. He's like, well, yeah, my grandma is a voodoo priestess. but I really want to watch The Office on Netflix. I don't have any electricity. I got to park my RV somewhere. I mean, he seemed like he didn't have a lot of options. Obviously, we don't know the full family dynamic that was going on. Oh, and let me say this, too, before we end. This was posted online by someone going by the name Cold Kaleidoscope 899. I wanted to give that shout out. Thanks for posting it. But if someone's actually practicing this stuff, you gotta be super careful about I'm not saying don't be their friends. I'm just saying you gotta be careful about pissing them off. Because if they are actually semi-proficient at what they're doing, and you believe that their magic can affect you, you're boned. It can really, really hurt you. It can end your life. Crazy story. You figure this young man had everything to live for, and then he dies of a heart attack in the middle of the woods. And here's the thing, right? The thing with curses, the thing that we see with a lot of stuff, it could just be a coincidence. He was having well, I think the implication was the chest pains originally was also that voodoo doll. See? So whatever he did, it wasn't going to change anything. This magic was going to affect him. That's possibility number one. The second possibility is, by Tony's account, he's a little overweight. What's a little overweight? For a normal weight for let's say a 6-foot man, 5'10", 6-foot man is like 180 pounds. I would classify as a little overweight of being like 220. If this guy was 460, which is definitely possible, right? And I'm like, he's a little overweight. He's a little overweight. We don't know. We don't know a lot of the specifics. But it could have been a coincidence. He could have just had a bad heart. But all of that aside, that aside about the powers of the dark arts and not being friends with people or being friends with people who practice this stuff, but understand that the risks you're taking. I think also you have to look at just that last line of the story that Tony wrote. It just ended with, quote, "We never told my aunt." I mean, that is what would you do in that case? Her son tragically dies, very, very young. 34 is very young. And then you find a voodoo doll of him in your grandma's possessions. What would you do in that case? I get it. I totally get not telling the aunt. But not telling Robbie's mom. I don't always think there's a need to know everything, every little detail. And I don't think it would make Robbie's mom feel better. I think I could better think, oh, he died in the place he loved the most. His favorite hunting spot. He died of a heart attack. He just went, ugh. Fell down and it was instant. Tragic that I lost my son, but there's worse ways to go. You can maybe make some peace with that versus his last moments lost in a flurry of fearful images as all of these demonic entities are floating around him, poking him in the heart and stuff like that. They're like, your grandma sent us, huh? You think electricity is free? You think it grows on trees? And he's like, ah! And then the demons are constantly poking him in the heart and he's like, no, that totally hurts, dude. And then they're beating him up. They're like, jeez, and they're just making stuff up. Yes, I'm sure. If the aunt had a choice between, he died a natural death or he was assaulted by a horde of hell, 10,000 legions poured out from the gaping maw of the afterlife and took turns beating him up. I mean, yeah, obviously, but you know what I mean? I think you could find a little bit of more peace there with a natural death rather than it being a supernatural death. But what would you do in that case? Would you have told the aunt what had really happened, that you had found this voodoo doll? Would you have wanted to know the truth? That he did not die a truly natural death, but his life was taken at such a young age because a spiteful grandmother thought he may have been stealing her electricity. DeadRabbitRadio@gmail.com is going to be our email address. You can also hit us up at Facebook.com/DeadRabbitRadio. TikTok is @DeadRabbitRadio. Dead Rabbit Radio is the daily paranormal, conspiracy, and true crime podcast. You don't have to listen to it every day. I'm glad you listened to it today. Have a great one, guys.